Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to cut through that ocean of information and really pull out the insights that matter most to you, our listener.
And today, we're looking at the 1920s, but not just as the Roaring Twenties.
No, we're calling it the American Crucible. It's a time of, just explosive cultural change, but it's smashed right up against this deep political cynicism and a lot of social conflict.
It's the perfect way to look at it because our sources show these two powerful narratives playing out at the same time. On one hand, you've got this complete crisis of integrity in the government with the Teapot Dome scandal right at the center.
And on the other,
Widespread social anxiety. It's fueling nativism, the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, and this really intense pushback against all the new cultural norms that were emerging.
okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Our mission here is to understand how these contradictory forces really define the decade for millions of Americans. And you can't start anywhere else but 1923. There was a political earthquake.
A huge one. The whole country was just stunned. On August 3rd, 1923, the headlines just scream, "President Harding dead." He dies so suddenly while traveling, and it was likely a heart attack.
But at the time, nobody knew for sure.
At the time, it was just confusion, misinformation, and almost immediately you get these conspiracy theories that, well, they lasted for decades.
And that uncertainty gets even worse because his death creates this massive leadership vacuum right when the corruption of his administration is about to explode into public view.
And then there's the cover-up. Almost immediately after he dies, his wife, Florence, she starts burning his papers, his personal documents, his correspondence.
It's destroying history.
Exactly. I mean, that attempt to just systematically erase the paper trail tells you everything. They knew there was rot at the core, and they were terrified of the public finding out the full extent of it.
That act, that frantic cover-up, it just perfectly sets the stage for the biggest political scandal of the era. Teapot Dome. For a lot of people, it's just a name in a history book.
But it was so much more. This was a really unprecedented breach of public trust.
So what was it exactly?
Well, the thing about Teapot Dome, which ran from about 21 to 23, is the sheer audacity of the bribery. This wasn't, some petty graft. We're talking about federally owned oil reserves.
In Wyoming and California.
Right. Critical national resources that were specifically set aside for the Navy's future fuel supply.
So these were national security assets, basically. How does a cabinet secretary just, sell them off?
It was clever. The Interior Secretary, Albert B. Fall, he orchestrates this secret transfer of control over the reserves. He gets them moved from the Navy Department over to his own, the Interior Department.
And once he has control,
He secretly leases them out to private oil tycoons. The big one was Harry Ford Sinclair. The leases themselves were technically legal maneuvers, but the real crime was the massive under-the-table bribery that went with them.
and that's the giveaway, right? How did he get caught?
It's the classic question. How did a public servant, Albert Fall, all of a sudden become so rich? He got what were essentially huge bribes, but they were disguised as, loans or gifts.
So someone noticed.
A Wyoming oil operator noticed something was wrong and wrote to his senator. That's what really kicked off the formal investigation in 1923.
And I can't imagine that was a smooth process.
Oh, not at all. The sources really highlight the resistance. It wasn't just records mysteriously disappearing. At one point, the office of Senator Robert M. La Follette, who was leading the Senate inquiry, was completely ransacked.
Wow.
It just shows you how powerful the forces fighting against accountability really were.
But the truth did come out.
It did. And the outcome was groundbreaking. Albert B. Fall was convicted of accepting bribes, and he became the very first former cabinet member to be imprisoned for crimes he committed while in office.
And that's a huge blow to public trust in the federal government.
A massive blow. It really damaged the faith people had in their institutions.
And this loss of trust is so key because here is the great contradiction of the 1920s. While Washington is just reeling from this internal decay and scandal, the rest of America is in the middle of a cultural explosion.
A total disconnect.
It really was a boom time, a decade of ballyhoo. Americans were spending a reported $5 billion a year on just recreation and entertainment.
It's this decade of intense contrast. You have the rot in government on one side and this exuberance in daily life on the other. This is when mass culture, fueled by radio and advertising, really takes off.
You see it everywhere. In sports, Babe Ruth wasn't just a player, he was a god.
Absolutely. His dominance was a cultural phenomenon. It crossed class lines. Baseball attendance just soared in the 20s.
And in 1923, you get Yankee Stadium opening, the house that Ruth built. It becomes a symbol of this new urban mass gathering culture.
Right. And the audience for baseball is getting so much broader. You have recent immigrants, the working class, all coming together in these stadiums. It was a real melting pot.
And at the same exact time, you have social norms just shattering, especially for women who had just gotten the right to vote in 1920.
The flapper. She becomes the icon of the age. Bobbed hair, shorter skirts, this energetic, rebellious youth culture dancing in the Charleston.
And crucially, they were pushing boundaries. Smoking in public and drinking bootleg whiskey in public.
Which brings us to the next great contradiction. Prohibition.
The fact that the flapper is drinking in public tells you everything you need to know
Ah.
about the failure of that federal policy.
It was a spectacular failure. The Volstead Act started in 1920, and the goal was this huge social experiment to curb alcohol use. The outcome, though, was profoundly ironic.
It didn't stop alcoholism.
Not at all. Instead, it created this massive, incredibly lucrative black market that gave birth to a sophisticated and violent gangster culture across the country. It cost millions of dollars and countless lives.
So you've got a federal government that's corrupt at the top, selling off national resources, and at the same time, it's trying to socially engineer the country through prohibition, which only leads to more crime.
And if you connect the dots, these institutional failures, they create a real sense of instability, a moral vacuum almost. If you can't trust Washington to manage its own resources or enforce its own laws properly, well, where does moral order come from?
And that crisis of trust, that's what fuels the next major trend of the decade, the search for conformity and the rise of nativism.
That climate of fear was incredibly powerful. The sources show that after World War I, when things got tough economically for a lot of middle-class Americans, they started looking for a scapegoat. And the finger pointed right at foreign influence.
This is where that idea of nativism, the fear that foreign influences are corrupting American life, just gains massive traction.
And the Ku Klux Klan capitalized on it perfectly. They rebranded themselves as this vehicle for disenchanted Anglo-Saxons to kind of reassert control.
And the Klan leadership was very clear about who the enemy was.
Oh, incredibly clear. Hiram Wesley Evans, who becomes the Imperial Wizard in 1923, he was explicit. He argued constantly against Catholic and Jewish immigration.
Saying they were a threat to American life.
A threat to the separation of church and state. He openly questioned the loyalty of American Catholics to the Pope, and in his own words, claimed they were a threat to America's genetic good stock.
And we have to be really clear here. In this period, the KKK was not some fringe organization.
No, not at all. It became a massive political force. Estimates on membership vary, but they range anywhere from 2.5 to maybe 6 million members nationwide by the mid-1920s.
With terrifyingly deep political reach. I mean, the Klan was controlling state and local politics in a lot of places.
Look at Indiana. It became the largest single Klan group in the entire country. At one point, they controlled the governor's office and both U.S. senators. This was mainstream power built on fear.
And they used spectacle to cement that power. The details from that July 4th gathering in 1923 in Kokomo, Indiana, are just unbelievable.
It's an incredible display of power and, frankly, cultural acceptance. You have over 200,000 members gathering, and the leadership knew how to put on a show. The Grand Dragon, D.C. Stevenson, he arrives in an airplane with KKK on the side.
And the crowd goes wild.
The sources say the cheers were so loud, some people actually fainted. This wasn't a secret society in the shadows. This was a massive public political event.
And that mainstream power led directly to policy changes. It wasn't just parades.
No, it wasn't. A perfect example is the 1922 election in Oregon. The KKK successfully backed a candidate for governor, Walter Pierce. But their biggest victory was passing the compulsory education bill.
A bill that mandated public schooling for all children.
Yes, and while it was framed in the language of assimilation and Americanization, everyone knew what it was really about.
It was a direct attack on Catholic parochial schools.
Exactly. It was about forcing conformity and erasing minority cultural and religious institutions.
And the dark side of this nativist fever was, of course, real localized violence.
Yeah.
You have to look at the Rosewood Massacre in Florida, January 1923.
Rosewood is just a tragic example of how this national climate played out on the ground. After a racially charged accusation, armed white vigilantes, including known Klansmen, they just descended on the black community of Rosewood.
They burned it to the ground.
They attacked homes, killed residents, and then a mob of hundreds burned everything that was left. Homes, churches, all of it.
And, of course, the justice system failed. The grand jury found insufficient evidence to prosecute any of the white vigilantes.
But, and this is a big but, This tide of political nativism did eventually hit a wall, a very powerful wall in the judicial system.
The legal establishment started to push back,
They did, and the ultimate challenge to the Klan's entire legislative agenda came in a 1925 Supreme Court case, Pierce v. Society of Sisters.
challenging that very Oregon law.
And it was a huge victory for individual rights. The Supreme Court unanimously struck the bill down. They rejected the state's claim that forcing assimilation was a valid political emergency. The court basically said the state does not have total control over a child's education.
And that ruling was celebrated as a triumph for liberty and a defeat for statism. It really showed that the courts, unlike the executive branch under Harding, could still provide a check on power.
That legal defeat seems to have been a major turning point. The state-sanctioned legitimacy the Klan needed to thrive, it began to crumble. And by 1930, Klan membership had collapsed to around 30,000.
So, after all that, what does this all mean? The American Crucible of the 1920s leaves us with this terrifying duality.
It does.
On one side, you have Harding's corrupt administration. It shows the danger of compromised authority inside the government, right up to his wife burning documents to hide the mess.
And on the other side, you have the rise of the KKK,
Yeah.
which shows the equal danger of mass conformity and social fear outside of government. When people lost trust in the system because of teapotdom, because of prohibition, they channeled that cynicism into organizations that promised order through hate.
The whole decade was just defined by this profound lack of integrity, both public and private. Political leaders selling national resources and powerful social organizations selling fear really makes you question where you get your information.
And this raises a really important question for all of us. When the very institutions that are designed to protect and inform you, your government, the police, major social organizations, when they themselves are compromised or promoting bigotry, how do you, as a citizen, cultivate true knowledge? What sources can you possibly rely on when your leaders are selling either distraction or just deeply rooted fear? The 1920s show us that trust is never just a given. It has to be earned.